On July 13, 2018, in Des Moines, Iowa, the day was warm and still, but for the family of 8-month-old Raija Straight, it became a day filled with overwhelming grief. Raija, a baby known for her happy laugh and curious eyes, was found unresponsive by her father, 17-year-old Jayden Straight. What began as a rushed effort to save her life at Mercy Medical Center quickly turned into a police investigation. As doctors examined her, they found a disturbing pattern of injuries and false explanations that pointed to a heartbreaking truth. Raija's life hadn't ended by chance. It was the result of a violent, intentional act. Raija was born on November 1, 2017, to teenage parents, 17-year-old Jayden Straight and 19-year-old Raija Anderson. From the start, she was described as an outgoing and joyful baby, someone who filled their lives with laughter and light. On July 13, 2018, that light was extinguished. The day began like any other summer day. Raija was with her father Jayden at her grandmother Toni Straight's home. According to Jayden, he was outside enjoying the day, playing with his dog, Nala, and lighting a few small fireworks. He said Raija had been left inside, asleep in her car seat, away from the activity and noise. Later, Jayden said he went back inside to check on her, maybe to feed her or take her outside. When he did, he found her unresponsive. Her body was limp, her eyes closed, and she showed no signs of breathing. It was a shocking and terrifying moment. Instead of calling emergency, Jayden called his mother, Toni, and asked her to drive them to the hospital right away. They rushed to Mercy Medical Center, where Jayden, clearly overwhelmed, handed Raija's lifeless body to a nurse in the emergency area. From there, medical staff began urgent efforts to try to save her. Raija Anderson, Raija's mother, soon arrived at the hospital. As she learned what was happening, a rush of emotions hit her. When doctors explained the extent of Raija's injuries, it became heartbreakingly clear that this was not an accident. The nature of the injuries did not match any explanation that suggested a natural cause or a simple mistake. Because of the seriousness and the clearly unnatural cause of Raija's injuries, the hospital contacted police right away. A full investigation was launched that same day. Since Raija had been under Jayden's care the entire time, he quickly became the main suspect. As the situation worsened, emotions inside the hospital boiled over. A fight broke out on the 3rd floor between members of Raija's family and Jayden's family. Raija's relatives, overwhelmed by sorrow and anger, directly confronted Jayden's family about what had happened to Raija. The scene became so intense that hospital security had to call in extra police officers to get things under control. Eventually, non-immediate family members were asked to leave. Among those involved in the confrontation were Jayden's mother, Toni Straight, and his sister, Mackenzie Straight. Not long after, Jayden was taken in for questioning. At the Des Moines police station, officers brought Jayden Straight in quickly after the disturbance at the hospital. Although Raija's family had expressed strong anger and made serious accusations, Jayden looked deeply upset. His face showed signs of sadness and shock. Because he was still underage, his mother, Toni Straight, had to give permission for him to be questioned. She stayed with him during the interview and sat quietly in the room as he was asked a series of difficult questions. The detective began by asking Jayden to describe the moment he found Raija unresponsive. Jayden said he had taken her out of her car seat and remembered her making some noises. He explained, in a nervous and stumbling way, that she seemed clumsy, and he had picked her up because of how she was acting. He said the moment filled him with fear and that his heart dropped. Instead of calling 911, he had chosen to call his mother. He explained that he had been too pumped up nervous to call emergency services himself. This answer made the detective raise an eyebrow slightly but quietly. The questioning then moved on to the visible injuries the hospital staff had noticed on Raija's body. Jayden immediately tried to explain the marks they had seen. He said she had 2 bruises on her forehead from hitting her head on the box spring 2 days earlier. He said she only cried for about 15 seconds after that. He denied causing any injuries that day, but admitted that he had dropped her a couple times when she was 2 years younger, which he claimed happened a few months earlier and seemed unrelated. Jayden also said that just before she became unresponsive, he had checked on her in the car seat and didn't think anything was wrong. He said she was still breathing and taking deep breaths, though she seemed a little flumsy when he picked her up. He insisted over and over that nothing happened between that moment and when they got to the hospital. According to him, there was no explanation for how her condition changed so suddenly. When the detective asked him who else might have hurt Raija if it wasn't him, Jayden said several times, "I don't really know who." He continued to deny that he had caused any harm. He said that Raija was his baby and that she meant everything to him, trying to make it clear that he would never hurt her. At that point, Detective Lori Kelly came into the room and sat down across from Jayden. Her tone was serious and direct. She told him that Raija had very serious injuries, including several broken ribs. She explained that babies do not suffer those kinds of injuries without another person being involved. When Jayden heard this, he seemed surprised. His eyes widened when she mentioned the internal injuries. Detective Kelly continued by telling Jayden that the story he was giving didn't match the medical evidence. She said that Raija had taken a hard blow to the stomach. She explained that this type of injury comes from a crushing hit to the abdomen and that the symptoms would have shown up right away. She told him clearly that what he was saying didn't line up with what the doctors were seeing. Then she gave him two direct possibilities. Either he had lost control and done something he regretted, or he had waited until he was alone and beat the baby. Even with all this evidence, Jayden kept denying that he had hurt Raija. He told the detectives that he had already explained everything that happened that day. He raised his voice and said that nothing unusual had occurred. He insisted, "I didn't do nothing to her," and added, "I don't even know what I can tell y'all." Detective Kelly responded with a final warning. She said that if he didn't tell the truth, people would fill in the blanks on their own and believe that he had waited for a chance to be alone with Raija so he could kill her. The weight of that statement stayed in the room, unspoken but impossible to ignore. Detectives kept pressing Jayden Straight for answers while they worked to trace Raija's final hours. They started piecing together what had happened in the lead-up to the tragedy. On July 12th, the day before, things had been far from peaceful. Jayden and Raija had been staying at Rihanna's apartment. That home, where the couple had often clashed, became the setting for another serious conflict. Rihanna had apparently caught Jayden being unfaithful, which led to a loud argument. The fight reflected the constant tension in their relationship, which had been full of arguments and emotional outbursts. This latest fight was just one of many that had come to define how they interacted with each other. After the argument, Jayden called his mother, Toni Straight, who came to pick him up around 11 in the morning. The details of what Jayden and his mother did for the rest of that day were vague and unconfirmed. Eventually, Toni brought Jayden back to Rihanna's apartment around midnight, suggesting that he and Rihanna had worked out some sort of fragile understanding between them. On the morning of July 13th, Rihanna woke up at 9 a.m. and got ready for work. Jayden and Raija were still asleep. Rihanna's father, Arturo Anderson, came by to drive her to work. Before leaving, he spent a moment with Raija, holding her and noticing that she seemed very fussy and more restless than usual. Both Rihanna and Jayden explained it away, saying she was teething and not to worry. After Rihanna left, Jayden stayed alone with Raija and gave her a bath. Later that morning, Toni showed up, and according to what she and Jayden told police, they left Rihanna's apartment with Raija around 11 a.m. But from that point forward, surveillance footage and statements from witnesses began to fill in the rest of the timeline in a way that raised serious concerns. At 12:51 p.m., security footage captured Toni walking into a Casey's General Store to pick up pizza. She was alone. Jayden and Raija weren't seen with her and were assumed to be waiting in the car. For the rest of the afternoon, Jayden and Raija were mostly unseen, tucked away inside the vehicle as Toni made several short stops. They went to Wesley Acres Senior Living, where Rihanna worked. Rihanna stepped out briefly to hand food to Jayden, but later said she didn't interact with Raija at all. Then they stopped at Panero's Mexican Grill, where Toni chatted with a friend for about 5 minutes. Again, Jayden and Raija stayed in the car and were not seen. The most critical part of the timeline began when they arrived at Toni's house at 2:24 p.m. Surveillance video showed Jayden carrying Raija into the house. Just 1 minute later, at 2:25 p.m., he came back outside without her. She had been left alone inside. At 2:55 p.m., Jayden was seen carrying Raija out of the house again. Less than a minute later, he brought her back inside. Then, at 2:56 p.m., he took her out one more time, gave her a quick kiss on the cheek, and brought her back in. That final return was the last time Raija was seen on camera. After that, she was no longer visible in the footage. From that moment on, she was alone inside with Jayden. At 3:07 p.m., Tony's neighbor, Benjamin Baldwin, showed up to ask for a ride to a nearby store. Tony and Benjamin left together and were gone for around 5 minutes. Before leaving, Benjamin had briefly gone inside and spoke with Jayden for just over a minute. Then he left, and once again, Jayden was the only person with Raija. Later, in his interview, Jayden claimed that after Benjamin left, he had gone outside to set off fireworks and had also been using his phone. However, the surveillance video did not show any fireworks. There was no proof to support that part of his story. Then, at 3:46 p.m., the timeline jumped to a sudden, frantic moment. Jayden rushed out of the house carrying Raija, who was limp in his arms. Tony was with him, and together they hurried to the hospital. But by that point, the 30 minutes Jayden had spent alone with Raija stood out sharply. During that time, something had clearly happened. The exact details of those missing minutes remained deeply troubling, and the evidence showed that Jayden was trying hard to cover up what had really gone on. After the situation at the hospital settled, Tony Straight, who was Jayden's mother, went to the police station so detectives could continue questioning her son. Even though the doctors had made it clear that Raija's condition was very serious and likely fatal, Tony didn't seem very moved by the news. Detectives paid close attention to how she acted and noticed that she didn't show the kind of clear emotional reaction they would have expected from a grandmother hearing such devastating information. Her body language came off as uncertain and guarded. It wasn't the kind of calm that comes from being strong, but more like she was holding something back on purpose. At the same time, police got a warrant to search Tony's house, which was the last place Raija was known to be awake and alert. What they found inside painted a troubling picture of the environment she had been in. The house was described as being in complete disarray, with messy items scattered all over. They found Raija's bottle, which may have still had some formula in it, her car seat, and a dirty mattress. All of these items gave a silent but clear view of the state the house was in. More importantly, officers found a video surveillance system with cameras that had been set up to monitor the outside of the home. On the front porch, they also found a live firework that hadn't been set off. This directly contradicted what Jayden had told them earlier, that he had already used up all the fireworks. When detectives asked Tony about the security cameras, her earlier calm attitude suddenly changed. She told them the outdoor cameras didn't work and said she didn't really know how the system operated. But that explanation didn't match what investigators already knew. They had already reviewed footage from the system that played an important role in helping them piece together the timeline of Raija's final hours. Then Jayden suddenly went missing after his first round of questioning. Tony was supposed to take him back to the hospital, but he never showed up there. When police asked her about it, her answers kept changing. First, she said she had dropped him off right at Mercy Medical Center. When that didn't match what they knew, she said she had left him on 6th Avenue, near the hospital. Finally, she admitted that Jayden had asked to get out of the car a couple blocks away from her house. She claimed she didn't know where he went after that. These shifting answers only increased the detectives' doubts about both Tony and Jayden. The more they talked, the less their stories made sense. Meanwhile, Raija's mother, Rihanna Anderson, gave detectives her own troubling memories of Jayden's behavior toward their daughter. She told them there had been moments where she felt like Jayden was being too rough with the baby and that she had stepped in to stop him. She also remembered seeing marks on Raija, including scratches and something on her neck that looked like a bruise or cut, shaped a little like a heart. She couldn't remember exactly when that injury had happened, but the memory added to the growing list of concerns. At the hospital, during a moment of emotional pain, Rihanna said she begged Jayden to tell the truth if he had done anything. She told him that it was already too late and that he should just come forward, but Jayden denied it, saying firmly that he had nothing to do with what happened to Raija. According to Rihanna, there was no sign in his expression that he might be hiding something. The tension between Rihanna's family and Jayden was already high, and everything that had happened only made it worse. Rihanna admitted to detectives that she had a very strong feeling about Tony. She said she believed deep down that Tony had something to do with what happened. She pointed out how Tony showed no emotion at all when told about Raija's coma, something Rihanna found deeply unsettling. She also caught a serious inconsistency in Jayden's account. When he first spoke to her, he told her that he had found Raija lying on the bed in the living room. But when he talked to the police, he said Raija was still in her car seat. That clear difference in his story raised even more doubt about what actually happened. On top of that, someone had reportedly shared disturbing claims with police, allegations that Rihanna and Jayden would sometimes put Raija in the basement if she cried, and cover her with dirty clothes so no one could hear her from upstairs. The police record did state that there was no evidence to confirm any of those claims, but the fact that those rumors even existed added to the growing concerns about what kind of environment Raija had been in. As the investigation continued, detectives started looking closely into Jayden Straight's background. What they found didn't match the way he had been acting, which appeared very sad on the surface. Police records, along with statements from people who knew him, painted a different picture. They described him as someone with a short temper, someone who could get angry very fast. He was known for having a strong and intense personality, with a tendency to lose control quickly. That kind of behavior had apparently led him to get involved in gang-related activity. It was during this time that he ended up spending a short period in juvenile detention, and this actually happened during the same period when Raija was born. His anger issues weren't limited to things outside his home. Reports said that Jayden would direct his rage toward his girlfriend Rihanna, who was also the mother of his child. Their relationship was reportedly full of conflict, with claims that both of them were involved in physical fights. On at least one documented occasion, Jayden was accused of hitting Rihanna during an argument. This showed that he could be violent not just in public, but also with people closest to him. He also reportedly showed signs of being controlling. One example was that he didn't want Rihanna having relationships with certain people, and he would try to isolate her from others. After his first interview with the police, where he didn't give any real answers, Jayden basically disappeared. Detective Lancaster, who had taken a lead role in the case, received a call from Tony's phone. But it wasn't Tony on the line, it was Jayden. He said he would call again after his sister's dance practice so they could set up another meeting. The casual way he said this showed that he didn't seem to understand or care how serious the situation was. As it turned out, he never called back, but he couldn't stay hidden for long. After about a day and a half of trying to find him, officers finally brought Jayden back in for a second interview. It was 2 a.m. on July 15th. The time added a weight to the situation. Tony came along again, still trying to shape how things were handled. In another unexpected move, she called Jayden's father, Raija Straight, and let him listen in on the interview, possibly thinking that his presence might influence what happened. The detectives got straight to the point and asked Jayden why he had disappeared. He said he left the station after the first interview because he thought the meeting was finished. Then he added something that shocked the officers. He said, "I was going to go to the hospital, but I got a ride. I want to go smoke, chill, and relax." That response, that he chose to hang out and smoke rather than go see his critically injured daughter, confirmed what the detectives had started to believe about his mindset and priorities. Things came to a breaking point. Because Jayden had avoided the truth and said something so uncaring, the detective finally gave him the devastating update. He told Jayden that at 7:51 that day, his daughter had passed away. She had no brain activity. She had only stayed alive because of machines, and now all life support had been stopped. Raija was gone. After giving him that painful news, the detective asked him directly, "What did you do to kill your daughter?" But even then, Jayden denied it again, saying, "I didn't do nothing to her." By this point, his words sounded empty and unbelievable. The evidence was growing, and his own statements had already shown how little concern he had shown for Raija. Inside the interrogation room, the pressure on Jayden Straight kept building. Even though the evidence was strong and the news of Raija's death had already been confirmed, he refused to admit anything and kept denying what happened. But the detectives had run out of patience. They were done letting him dodge questions or change his story. They were ready for a final answer. Without warning, one of the detectives leaned in and gave him the official statement that changed everything. Jayden was told he was being charged with first-degree murder and child endangerment that led to death. The seriousness of those words was clear. Both charges were felonies and came with severe consequences. The detective also explained clearly that he would not be treated as a juvenile. He would be charged as an adult. At just 17 years old, with a background that included a short time in juvenile detention and accusations of violence, his future was now entirely in the hands of the legal system. He was arrested right then and there in the interrogation room. The handcuffs went on, ending what little freedom he still had. Even after Jayden was in custody, the medical team uncovered one last disturbing detail. After looking deeper into Raija's injuries, doctors found something that confirmed what many had already suspected. Her rib fractures were consistent with shaken baby syndrome. This wasn't just another injury to add to the list. It clearly showed that what happened to her had not been an accident. The extent of her injuries, including damage inside her body and signs that she had been shaken violently, led doctors to a firm conclusion. They stated that Raija's death had come from a deliberate act of violence. Someone had attacked her on purpose, someone who was supposed to protect her. The findings made one thing clear. Jayden was never planning for Raija to survive that day. Her injuries were severe and ongoing. The symptoms came on quickly and were impossible to ignore. Jayden had tried to avoid taking responsibility, even trying to pass blame onto others. But everything pointed to a violent and intentional act. From the moment Raija was alone with him at Tony's house, her life was in serious danger. When he first spoke to hospital staff, who were still trying to figure out how to help her, Jayden gave them no answers. He just said he didn't know what had happened. He didn't offer any sign that this might have been an accident. His flat, emotionless answer stood out, especially as more information came to light. As the legal case continued, the charges moved forward, backed by strong evidence. In 2019, Jayden Straight chose to plead guilty to second-degree murder, along with other related charges connected to Raija's violent death. By doing so, he avoided going through a full trial, sparing the family from hearing every painful detail in court. But the outcome was still severe. He was sentenced to 100 years in prison, a punishment that means he will likely spend the rest of his life behind bars. Even though the case ended with a conviction and a long sentence, one painful question remains. What could lead a teenage father to take the life of his own child in such a brutal way? It's a question that might never be answered. For the people who knew about the case, and especially for those who knew Raija Straight, that question leaves behind a deep sense of loss for a baby whose life ended far too soon.